mighty. Not because you want to, but you have to. Be bold and no time to be bashful. Grab life by the horns like a natural. Be sharp, be quick, and be agile. Never ever let a competitor catch you. Stay ahead of whatever is trying to pass you. Though it's not a race.
Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Samuel Ray, also known as Dr. Sam, and I'm not sure what I'm going to call this segment. I used to call it Morning Boot Up because I would record it and release weekly in the morning before, all of the day's activities, work, and whatnot. However, that has changed due to my current job and other factors in my life. Anyway, today's episode of whatever I'm going to choose to call this solo talk segment is sort of a springboard off of my last one. So feel free to go check that out. I'm only going to give a very brief summary, but in that one I was talking about how easily and almost automatically, habitually, people get offended by a disagreement with a statement of theirs and take that as a personal attack upon their whole existence. Well, kind of influenced or inspired by the same string of events that inspired the previous topic, stuff that I've been seeing though for many years. And I mentioned it on Twitter X, whatever you want to call it, is subtext. I said I'm probably going to talk about that as well. And here's the reason why. Because after a sequence of events, I decided I was going to talk on that concept of how people get offended at a disagreement and take someone disagreeing with and or challenging a statement of theirs as a personal attack. Someone had to obviously feel like I was talking about them specifically, even though that's not really in my nature. Like, if I have a problem with someone, I will tell them directly, and I like to look at experiences and observations, and I like to break down the why behind it, the reason it happened, the cause. I like to break down patterns of causality and figure out how we can learn from that and prevent the bad situations from happening while, trying to push the odds in our favor for good outcomes. I mean, that is what knowledge is good for. You learn from what you experience and what you see, and then you apply it to make future situations better. And that is the meaning of wisdom, applying knowledge to do things better, to become better. So I take that approach for these kind of things. If an individual inspires me to talk about a concept, and then I announce that I'm going to make some content talking about that concept, I'm not, as they call it, subtweeting. And that's, I'm sorry, it is a very silly concept. And I know a lot of people do it. Like, they try to badmouth someone essentially behind their back on the internet. It originated from Twitter, the term anyway, where someone will badmouth someone else on Twitter without saying their tag or their handle or their name. And they call that subtweeting, which is derivative of subtext, right? Something that is implied or inferred but not said outright. And I'm not sure who said this, but there was a phrase that I really like. And it was someone who said, "I know people who use subtext and they're all cowards." I think that really rings true. Someone who's going to talk about someone else behind their back is a coward. That's a cowardly action. And the thing is, I understand, since a lot of people do that, it's easy to assume that that's what I was doing. However, I was focusing my statement and my content that was to come on the concept behind the behavior, not the individual who partook of the behavior. That's what I do. That's who I am. So even if someone mistakes it for being what a lot of people do, this subtweeting, the actions of others do not define my actions. And the actions of others do not override my own intent or my own words and actions. And I will always stand by that. I determine why I do or say what I do. No one else gets to determine that for me. So I was therefore inspired to talk about that concept of subtext, because the only time, and I'm just going to say this outright, the only time a concept like subtext is valid is in storytelling. That's the only thing I can think of where it would be valid, where you use subtext to add subtle details that, once picked up upon by the reader or viewer, the person partaking of the entertainment, these subtle details enrich the experience. They add a new light, a new understanding to what the person has already taken in visually and auditorily. It can recontextualize what they've already seen in the story thus far. That's the real purpose of subtext. It enhances the experience. However, the concept of subtext is usually used in a political capacity, of people trying to shoehorn their political ideologies into media or into conversations without saying it outright, and that's just the cowardly way of doing it. Or subtextually having digs and insults at people without saying it outright, and that's again a cowardly way of doing things. And I would say it's never valid. But then the problem also occurs where, because so many people so easily use subtext in their normal, non-entertainment related activities, it makes it easier for others to try to read subtext where it doesn't actually exist, such as in my case. Someone assuming that I was subtweeting someone when I was attacking the concept, not the person who, participated in that in a recent situation that I experienced. Because the thing is, in that case, there's a lot of people who do the same stuff. A lot of people. So I wasn't going to name any particular names, because one individual doing that is not important. They really aren't. And they're nothing special in that they're doing something that is seen on the daily, pretty much, on the internet in this current social media age. People do that kind of stuff all the time. So why the heck would I waste my time and energy trying to, subtextually call someone out or, badmouth them behind their back, when it's a more systemic problem culturally? And it's a behavioral pattern or commonality that I believe just in general shouldn't be. It's not a good trait, right? So I was talking in a more general behavioral term, not pointing towards any one person. And as Sai, my brother Sai Prime, put it so well, he said, "I love seeing the self-absorbedness from people thinking it's all about them. Plus, if you name names, they'll call it harassment. If you don't, subtweeting." And he put subtweeting in quotes. So, he's right. If you call someone out directly, they'll be like, "Oh, this person's harassing me." That's part of the reason anyway why I don't even do that. It's not worth the time and energy. It's not worth the brain cells. But if you then address the concept behind the behavior, then they try to call it subtweeting. It's a catch-22. You're screwed either way. So I just literally did not engage, right? It's just a lose-lose scenario, and the only way to win is to not play the game when that happens. And I stated that I'm just going to stand by not saying any names because I wanted to focus on the topic rather than any individual. I don't use subtext when it comes to talking about these kind of things. I mean what I say and I say what I mean. It's a concept, the behavior, the mentality behind it, even the psychology that I want to address, that I want to attack, that I want to break down, pull apart for the failure that it is, the failure to be mature, failure to be intelligent, the failure to be, to have emotional maturity and self-awareness and the wherewithal to just carry yourself with decorum. And those are all things that everyone is capable of learning, even if it's not, their natural tendency. Everyone can learn how to be more mature. It's part of being a human. It's part of growing up. But we are seeing less people nowadays growing up than ever before. Less people maturing than ever before. We have people in their 30s who sometimes still have the maturity level of a teenager. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. So, I'm gonna continue to address the concepts. I'm going to continue to address the mentality, the psychology, the facts, and get down to the truth of a matter. And in this case, it's that subtext is only useful in enriching stories or in enriching a learning experience, where once someone finds your subtle details, it can make the light bulb go off. It can give you that aha moment, that eureka moment, where it all makes sense now. That's subtext in its best form. Subtext in the way of trying to be subtle and cowardly and talk about someone behind their back, or try to squeeze, certain sociopolitical ideologies into places where it doesn't belong, or into conversations where it doesn't belong, or to squeeze a dig at someone into a conversation or a place where it doesn't belong. Anything of that sort is a coward's action, a cowardly display. So what I like to do in these is I like to wrap things up on a more positive note. And what can be more positive than taking a negative tendency and figuring out what can we learn from this and how can we be better from this? How can we improve from that? So in this case, that is literally don't use subtext and don't try to read subtext where it doesn't exist. Don't use subtext where it doesn't belong. If you have something to say about a person, be direct about it. If you can't be direct about it, then you have no right to say anything. If you're going to say something about someone specific, say it to their face, so to speak. At least, the very least, say their name. Tell people who you're talking about. But if what you're talking about is less about the individual and more about the behavior that the individual displayed, or the activity that the individual participated in, or anything of that sort, that is a larger problem than just the individual, then yeah, do not say the individual's name. Don't make it about any one person, because in that case, that's just petty. So don't be petty, right? Keep it on point. Keep it about the concept, not the individual. And if you see someone doing that, attacking a concept, a behavior, a tendency, a mindset, if you feel like they're talking about you and they're not talking about you directly, do not assume they're talking about you. Because in which case you played yourself, you just outed yourself as exactly who the person's talking about, and you just made yourself look worse than they ever made themselves look, or than they even made you look. So just leave subtext out of the conversation unless you're using it to enrich something, to enrich a story, to enrich a learning experience. I've done that in teaching. I used to teach people how to play fighting games because I played them for like 20 plus years. There was a few people who I actually taught in gameplay itself. And what I did was I actually used a form of subtext. I would create scenarios and situations where in that situation, that setup, I would do the same thing every time. and I would set up those situations in such a way that the answer to it was hinted to them. And then through repetition, I would continue to try and engineer that situation until they figured out the answer in an intuitive fashion. That was me using subtext to teach without just telling someone the answer. I guided them to the answer while they were learning through doing. And when that happened, they had these little victories that were satisfying. One time I did that in Virtua Fighter with someone who had only played the game like once before, and she was figuring some stuff out on the fly because of how I was engineering those situations. And then there were a few times where, as a result of that, I was put in a situation where I didn't exactly know the answer, or the way out, so to speak. And so she legitimately earned some victories through, passing the little quizzes I was giving her, so to speak. Would get out, get through the situation that I was putting in front of her, and then would put me into a situation and she had a life lead, or I was, just a few hits from getting KO'd, losing the round, and so she would win the round legitimately. It was a perfect way of teaching, in my opinion, because it wasn't, it didn't feel, I don't make it feel like I'm lecturing them or really like giving them a written test, right? And I'm not patronizing or talking down to them. And when they won rounds, and I'm speaking of multiple people I've taught in this way, when they win rounds, they earned it themselves. It's legitimate, and therefore it feels better than if it was, given to them, where you like throw the match. No, I wasn't throwing anything. And so it was legitimate teaching. That was subtext used in a positive and creative way, or not creative, productive way. It led to some positive outcomes. Use subtext in a positive way. Don't use it in a destructive and toxic way. And then on the other side of the coin, don't assume someone's using subtext in a cowardly way towards you if they haven't expressly said anything, or if they haven't, made it clear. Like, you know for real when someone is doing that, but you have to look at it with a rational lens. You can't let your emotions cause you to get offended, because as soon as you're offended, your reason is drastically less effective. And it's way too easy to then feel like someone is trying to use subtext to talk about you behind your back when they're not, such as in my case, where in reality I was talking about the concept. And I've actually made that pretty clear, because in my statements I was talking about the concept, the behavior, not the person. So when someone's doing that, don't say, oh, I know you're talking about me. You don't know that. You're not a mind reader. So don't act like you are. And I guarantee you, if you approach the concept of subtext in this way, a more balanced, even, and rational way, you will have much better social interactions. You'll also have much less stress from feeling like people are talking about you when they're really not. And you're also just going to be less petty towards people, less cowardly. So that'll uplift you as well. Not only in the eyes of others, because that only matters to a certain extent, but it just will improve your mindset in general. You're not going to feel like everyone's out to get you, or everyone hates you and is talking about you behind your back. That's just not a way to live. And it's a victim mentality that's just unhealthy. So don't always make it about you, right? Keep it pushing. Keep on with your day, with your life. If someone's not talking about you directly, ignore them. Let them talk. Even if they are trying to subtweet you or use subtext to talk about you, let them be petty. Be the bigger person. And don't do the same. Don't try to return like for like. Just keep it pushing, keep it honest, keep it direct, and keep it respectable. Let subtext be used as a positive force to guide people towards improvement in something, like in a teaching capacity, or to guide them to new conclusions, recontextualization of details past in things like stories. And in general, it can be an extremely gratifying thing if you use it the right way. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about this time. If you want to hear more of my little solo talks, I will be continuing to do this on probably a bi-weekly basis, every other week, just to keep it going with my life schedule. And I'm going to try to just resume the podcast proper, where Sai and I, and sometimes a guest member, talk about some sort of concept or topic that's related to video games, whether it be design, psychology, or a little more opinion-based matters. And if you're on, the YouTube and similar video streaming platforms, like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this, if you disagreed with anything I said, feel free to hit dislike and tell me what it was in the comments. Just say it in a respectful way. Be direct, but be respectful, and you shall receive respect in kind, and we can have some good discussion. I love talking about things, even if you disagree with me. I'm not going to take it as a personal attack to my very being. I'm going to hear your perspective, and we can discuss. That's what we're all about here. And if you're listening in audio only podcast platform, and I'm on several, so on your podcast platform of choice, go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast, because I'm using it as more of an umbrella name for all of my discussion related content that doesn't heavily rely on visuals. And there's going to be more coming out for sure. Follow that, and then you can also tag me on Twitter X using the hashtag counterpickpod, all together as one word. So yeah, I look forward to seeing any feedback you may have and having some good conversation in the comment sections and on social media. And I've got a lot more content that I'm working on. I'm diversifying it a bit, so I'm gonna have more types of content and such on YouTube, and my streams are becoming more consistent, and I'm starting to lock in sort of routine on what games I feature so that the community knows what to expect each month, putting out schedules and such. And that's pretty much it. I'm using a new microphone for this episode, so let me know how I sound. Do I sound better than in previous episodes and uploads, or could I tweak it a little bit, because I'm now using an Audio-Technica AT2020 plus USB mic. I don't have room for a whole, what is that called, XLR interface hardware. I just don't have the room or the free outlet, so I'm still kind of stuck to USB mics. But I recently upgraded to this one because it's just in general higher quality than what I had before, and it also enabled me to sell my old one to Sai Prime, which improved his microphone situation. So it was a win-win. I was able to get this for essentially half price since he bought my old stuff from me. So it was a good, mutually beneficial situation, and I so far like the way this sounds. So let me know your thoughts on the audio quality and how my voice sounds. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. I'm gonna go on with the rest of my day. You have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or night, whatever time it is in your corner of the world. And I will see you in the next content that I upload, which will be very soon. Alright, have a great one. Samuel Ray signing off.